Hello everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic day. I am Jared Hinkey, the MLS coordinator at KAAR, here to bring you another edition of Tips and Tricks.
In this edition of Tips and Tricks, I'm going to go over the Sold Off MLS field. And that's a relatively new field that we added in October of 2021. Here I am on my dashboard in Flexmls. If I scroll down, I have a gadget for messages. I'm going to click on messages. Now I can scroll through all the messages that have gone out. And there's our message from October of last year announcing that Sold Off MLS field. The main new thing that the field does is allow you to put those properties into Flexmls where you don't have a listing agreement, but rather you're bringing a buyer to an unrepresented seller and you have that agreement to show property. This is the only time that you put a property into Flexmls without a listing agreement. You do need certain documents to have in order to put the Sold Off MLS listing into Flexmls. You need RF-161, the agreement to show property, RF-302, confirmation of agency status, it's going to be signed by your buyer, a settlement statement showing that a commission was paid, an input form that is signed by the seller. You will put the property into the MLS after it closes. Keep in mind your MLS rules. Then it must be put into the MLS within 72 hours after that closing. When you go to put that listing into Flexmls, under the listing member, you'll type in 1000, and that will bring up an option for non-member, because keep in mind the seller is unrepresented. Head on over to the main fields. Under contract info, you'll find that Sold Off MLS field. Go ahead and mark that as yes. Then you can add in the listing. After you've added that listing, be sure you put in at least one photo that shows the main front entryway to the property. After you've added that in, go to edit the listing and change the status to closed. There is a second situation in which you'd mark Sold Off MLS as yes. Before we get into that, I want to bring up the MLS rules again. I'm in section 1, and I do want to remind everyone that if you have a listing agreement, that listing needs to be put into the MLS within 2 business days of the effective date on the listing agreement. Or if you've already begun to publicly market that listing, the listing needs to be put into the MLS within 1 business day of marketing to the public. Again, the only new allowance coming from the Sold Off MLS field is the ability to enter in those properties in which you don't have a listing agreement, but rather you're bringing a buyer to an unrepresented seller. You have all the forms that you see here, and you enter in that property into the MLS within 72 hours after the closing date. Sold Off MLS does not create an exemption to the rule that listings must be put into the MLS within 2 business days from the effective date on the listing agreement, or within 1 business day of publicly marketing that listing. With that clarification out of the way, let's get back into Flexmls, and we'll talk about the second scenario that you'd use the Sold Off MLS field. And that's when you have a listing agreement, but your listing goes under contract before you have an opportunity to actually get that listing into Flexmls. Keep in mind you still have the time frame of 2 business days or 1 business day from publicly marketing the property to get it into the MLS. When you do put that listing into the MLS, since it's already under contract, you would mark the Sold Off MLS field as yes, add the listing, and then immediately go into edit the listing and put it into the pending status. I will leave you with where you can find our MLS rules and regulations and policies. I'm on our website, KAARMLS.com, looking at the Realtor tab, MLS and key information, and if I scroll down to the bottom, there I can find a link to those documents. That is everything I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and keep an eye out for more tips and tricks videos in the future.